You may be trying to change your life with the exact mechanism that's keeping you the same. You make the plan. You get serious. You delete the app by the notebook, set the alarm, make the schedule, and tell yourself, this time, I'm actually going to do it. And for a moment, you believe it. Then a few days pass. You're back on your phone, back to putting things off, back to staying up too late, back to the same habits you promised yourself were over. And the frustrating part isn't that you don't know what to do. You do. You know what you should stop doing. You know what you should start doing. You can probably explain the entire solution to someone else. But somehow, knowing hasn't been enough to make you different. That's the part worth investigating. Because if you genuinely want to change, but repeatedly return to the same behavior, then maybe the problem isn't that you don't want a new life badly enough. Maybe something inside your current life is quietly rewarding you for staying exactly where you are. And that is what "you're trapped" actually means. Not trapped by your circumstances. Not trapped because your personality is permanently fixed. You're trapped inside a pattern that has become easier to repeat than to question. And once you understand how that pattern works, something uncomfortable happens. You stop seeing your behavior as random. You start seeing the system behind it. Think about the last time you procrastinated on something important. Not the excuse you gave yourself afterward. The actual moment it started. You open your laptop. The document is sitting there. You know exactly what needs to happen, but there's a small amount of resistance. Maybe the task is difficult. Maybe you don't know where to begin. Maybe you're worried the result won't be good enough. Maybe you're just tired. Nothing dramatic happens. You don't consciously decide, I'm going to waste the next 2 hours. You just check your phone, then email, then YouTube, then one random search leads to another. And 20 minutes later, you're watching something you didn't even care about. That's the strange part. The behavior didn't begin with a decision. It began with a feeling. And that distinction changes the entire problem. Because if you think you're failing because you lack discipline, you'll keep trying to force yourself to behave better. But what if the behavior is doing something for you? What if procrastination isn't just about avoiding work? What if, for a few minutes, it's helping you escape the feeling that comes with the work? The uncertainty, the boredom, the pressure, the possibility of failing, the feeling that you should already be further ahead. Your brain doesn't need to consciously understand any of this behavior to become useful. It only needs to learn one thing. When this feeling appears, this action makes it go away. And that is where the loop begins. A difficult task creates tension. You avoid it. The tension drops. Your brain notices a change. That's enough. You don't need a conscious decision. You don't need a motivational speech. You don't even need to enjoy the distraction. Relief itself can be rewarding. And suddenly, the thing you call procrastination starts making sense. You're not choosing YouTube because YouTube is more important than your future. You're choosing immediate relief because your brain is extremely good at responding to what's happening right now. Your future doesn't send a physical signal into your nervous system. Your discomfort does. That's why you can sincerely care about something and still avoid it. The part of you thinking about next year wants one thing. The part of you experiencing discomfort right now wants another. And when the two collide, the immediate feeling often wins. This is why motivation can feel so powerful one night and completely useless the next morning. At night, you're imagining the future. You're thinking about who you could become. You're picturing the results. You're planning tomorrow. Everything feels possible because there is no immediate discomfort to overcome. Then morning arrives. The alarm rings. You're tired. The room is cold. Your phone is within reach. And suddenly your beautiful plan has to compete with something much more powerful. What feels easiest right now? That doesn't mean your motivation was fake. It means motivation was never the entire system. And this is where a lot of self-improvement advice starts breaking down. We treat behavior like a debate. We think if we can convince ourselves that something is important enough, we'll finally do it. But your brain doesn't make every decision by sitting down and asking which option is best for your long-term future. A huge amount of behavior happens through learned associations. The room you're in, the time of day, the emotional state you're in, the people around you, the object sitting beside you, the sequence of events that happened yesterday. All of these can become part of the pattern. which means you might not simply have a habit. You might have a context that automatically brings a habit to life. Think about your bed. For some people, the moment they get into bed, the phone comes out, not because they consciously decided that bedtime means scrolling. It just became part of the sequence. Bed, phone, feed, stimulation. Sleep much later than planned. Repeat tomorrow. Now move the same person somewhere else. Put them on a long flight with no Wi-Fi. Suddenly, they can go several hours without checking the same apps they supposedly couldn't live without. Nothing about their personality changed. The environment changed, and that tells you something important. Sometimes you're trying to fix a behavior while leaving the conditions that produce the behavior completely untouched. You're asking yourself to be stronger while making the unwanted behavior as easy as possible. The phone is right beside you. The distracting website is one click away. The snack is sitting on the desk. The work you're avoiding requires 10 steps just to begin. Then you look at the outcome and call yourself undisciplined. But your environment has already been voting, and it keeps voting for whatever requires less effort and provides fast relief. That's not an excuse. It's a mechanism. And understanding a mechanism gives you something excuses never can, a place to intervene. But there is an even deeper problem, because changing your environment can make behavior easier to change. It doesn't automatically explain why you keep returning to the same identity. Think about how casually people describe themselves. I've always been a procrastinator. I'm just bad with routines. I never stick with anything. I'm terrible at waking up early. I've never been disciplined. At first, those sentences sound harmless. You're just describing your history. But eventually, your history starts becoming a prediction. You stop asking, what am I going to do today? And without realizing it, you start asking, what does someone like me normally do? That's a very different question, because now you're not only choosing an action, you're protecting a model of yourself. If you spent years believing you're someone who never follows through, then following through creates a strange kind of friction. You sit down and actually finish the work, and suddenly you have evidence that contradicts your story. Maybe you're not incapable. Maybe you were never inherently lazy. Maybe you simply practiced avoidance for a very long time. That sounds like a small distinction. It isn't, because something that was practiced can be practiced differently. But this is also where people make another mistake. They try to change their identity before they have enough evidence to support it. They wake up one morning and announce, I'm a completely different person now. Then they build a routine that requires them to behave like a completely different person immediately. Wake up at 5, work out every day, eat perfectly, read every night, no social media, work 8 hours, meditate, journal, sleep 8 hours, become more productive, become more confident, become more disciplined. For a few days, it feels incredible because the fantasy of transformation is emotionally rewarding. Then real life shows up. You sleep through the alarm. You miss the workout. You spend 2 hours scrolling. And suddenly the entire identity collapses. I knew I couldn't do it. But look at what just happened. You didn't prove that you can't change. You create a system so demanding that your old patterns had almost no chance of surviving it. Then you interpreted the predictable collapse as evidence about your character. That's the trap. You turn a failed strategy into a judgment about yourself. And once you believe the judgment, the next attempt starts with less confidence and more pressure. So you try something even more extreme, and the cycle repeats. This is why your biggest problem may not be that you haven't tried hard enough. It may be that you've been trying to change at the wrong level. You're fighting the behavior after it happens. You're fighting yourself during the hardest moment. You're waiting until you're tired, stressed, bored, and already holding your phone, and then asking yourself to suddenly become incredibly disciplined. That's like waiting until your car is already going off the road, and then deciding you're going to become better at driving. The better place to intervene is earlier, much earlier. There's a moment between the trigger and the action. The task becomes uncomfortable. You feel the urge to escape. Your hand moves toward the phone, but the app isn't open yet. That's the moment. It's tiny, and because it's tiny, people ignore it. They think change should happen through some giant decision, a dramatic Monday morning, a new year, a life-changing realization. But behavior change is often much less cinematic than that. It's the 10 seconds when you notice what you're about to do. It's the moment you realize you're opening another tab instead of starting a task. It's the moment you feel the urge to check your phone and leave it on the desk. It's the moment you want to quit after 5 minutes and decide to do 2 more. Those moments don't feel important, but they're where the pattern gets interrupted. And once you understand that, the goal changes. You're no longer trying to eliminate every impulse. You're learning not to automatically obey every impulse. That's a much more realistic target, because the urge to procrastinate may still appear. The urge to scroll may still appear. The desire to stay in bed may still appear. The difference is that the urge no longer gets the final vote. And this leads to a much deeper question. If you can interrupt the pattern, how do you make the new behavior strong enough to eventually become easier? The answer isn't to make yourself suffer more. It's to give your brain repeated evidence. Your brain learns from what happens repeatedly. So if every difficult task ends with you escaping, you're practicing escape. If every uncomfortable conversation ends with you avoiding it, you're practicing avoidance. If every evening ends with 2 hours of scrolling, you're practicing that sequence. But the reverse is also true. If discomfort appears and you stay for another minute, that's a different experience. If you want to check your phone and don't, that's a different experience. If you feel resistance and still begin, that's a different experience. One repetition won't transform you, but one repetition is how a different pattern begins. And this is where I want to make an important distinction. You are not trying to prove that you're disciplined. You're trying to become more predictable to yourself. Right now, maybe you don't trust your own promises. You say you'll work for an hour, and you don't. You say you'll go to bed early, and you don't. You say you'll start Monday, and Monday becomes next Monday. Eventually, the problem isn't just the behavior. It's that your own promises stop carrying weight. So start making smaller promises. Not because you're incapable of more, because you're trying to rebuild credibility with yourself. Instead of saying, I'm going to work for 3 hours, say, I'm going to open the document and work for 10 minutes. Then do it. Instead of, I'll never scroll before bed again. Put the phone across the room tonight. Then do it. Instead of, I'm becoming a completely disciplined person.
You
Keep
open the
one
app
promise
to
that you
practice.
normally break.
Then you close it.
That's evidence.
Not because